The views and opinions expressed in this interview are those of the guest. This content is for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute medical, financial, or professional advice.
What do we do about suppression? What do we do about the men in black? Literally, some of the greatest inventors I've known, for example, Paul Brown, was literally threatened at a Tesla conference. The gentleman who threatened him showed a CIA badge, which I found out later, CIA doesn't issue any badge whatsoever. It's intimidation. Intimidation is the biggest word for this type of problem.
Hello, amazing people, and welcome back to the Ryan Files. Today, we dive headfirst into the frontier of forbidden science with physicist, inventor, and president of the Integrity Research Institute, Dr. Tom Valone. This man has spent decades walking the razor's edge between suppression and discovery, championing breakthrough energy, propulsion, and bioenergetic healing long before they were cool or even allowed to be discussed. From zero-point energy and quantum propulsion to NASA-inspired electro-healing devices, and even his upcoming ufology textbook, Dr. Valone has lived the stories others only speculate about. It's the week before Christmas, and if you're still searching for a gift that inspires the mind and awakens curiosity, visit integrityresearch.org to check out Dr. Valone's books and products. They're perfect for anyone who believes the future of energy and maybe the future of humanity is about to change forever. So grab your cocoa, light up the tree, and settle in, because this one takes us from the lab to the stars. Let's dive in. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me this week on the Ryan Files. Our guest today is Dr. Tom Valone. He's a physicist, inventor, and president of the Integrity Research Institute, a nonprofit advancing breakthrough energy, propulsion, and bioenergetic research. For years, Dr. Valone has explored technologies once thought impossible, from zero-point energy and advanced propulsion to bioelectromagnetic healing. Today, we'll dive into where frontier science truly stands, what's real, what's emerging, and what could redefine our future. Thank you so much for joining me.
Welcome. Glad to be here.
So, you sent over some questions and whatnot, and I've done some research on your work. And I think out of the gate, the thing that was interesting to me is you're a nonprofit NGO, which is non-governmental organization. Why did you and your wife decide to incorporate your institute as that?
Well, in 2000, we actually had a kind of a conflict with the former Integrity Institute, which was in existence for 10 years. But the important part was we really have a stated mission that was already issued to the IRS for nonprofits, and that is that we pursue the research integrity in the areas of energy, propulsion, and bioenergetics. And formally, we weren't doing that too well with a board of 10 to 12 people. So we reincorporated as Integrity Research Institute and emphasizing the research part of it. And essentially, we found that a year before, by the way, I tried to have a conference on future energy, which was originally designed to be a conference on free energy, thinking that after 20 years, I started in 1980 with the free energy concept with a homopolar generator that I actually used as my master's project in University of Buffalo for a physics degree. But it actually ended up causing me to be fired from the U.S. Patent Office. So this was a real problem because trying to use the Commerce Department auditorium after the State Department threw me out, essentially I was labeled as a cold fusion fanatic. And in 2000, cold fusion was a real suppressed and denigrated subject in science. Even today, it still is an emerging science that I hope will become profitable and commercializable. But back then, it was basically the reason why the government didn't want to sponsor anything with cold fusion. And I only had one speaker out of 14 for a 2-day conference. And he was actually a very well educated Dr. Ed Storms from a national laboratory, Los Alamos. So anyways, going through that experience of being fired, I found that I could finish my PhD during the time off and get rehired with back pay. But in 2000, we felt hey, we're going to start to orient this just to a nonprofit endeavor and serve the public. Because Washington, D.C. is filled with more nonprofits than any other city in the nation. So I had a chance to study a lot of them that are very successful here. And I've seen some grow from 2 or 3 people organizing it to literally 50 or 100 people. Rocky Mountain Institute is one of my best examples of that, with Amory Lovins starting it just by himself and his wife. So, yeah, basically that's it. And we do focus on each one of them with a free Future Energy e-news every month that listeners can sign up for on our homepage, integrity-research.org.
Awesome. I want to really get into the energy part of it, but you have some kind of, I guess you call them mission pillars: energy, propulsion, and bioenergetics. Those seem to be the 3 focuses of what you guys do at the Institute. Among those areas, though, what breakouts, stand out to you right now?
Well, right now, you can see right behind me, I'll point in the right direction. We've had, for example, various luminary scientists that represent the cutting edge of various endeavors in emerging energy science. And the emerging energy part of it is very important, I feel, because that hardly ever gets to the mainstream news. Washington Post, New York Times, Time Magazine, you go down the list. So essentially, for example, there's an endeavor to do energy harvesting. Our institute sells dozens of different reports on various ways to harvest energy. For example, osmosis is one that nobody's probably heard of, but we have a whole report on how osmosis can be used in a river, lake type of environment. There's also other examples of solar energy from space. Space solar power is literally 10 times the output for the same solar panel that you would get on Earth. About 1 kilowatt per square meter on Earth. It's 10 kilowatts per square meter in space. So we had a kernel from it was in New Mexico Air Force Base, and it's on YouTube actually, where he describes their separate Air Force endeavor to launch solar panels in space and microwave it down to Earth. And I could keep on going. There's plenty of other unusual energy concepts that I published several articles on as well, which all are clean energy with non-fossil fuels.
I got you, man. How does this, I imagine at some point, and all the conspiracy theories are out there, obviously. Anytime you're talking 0-point energy or anything like that, crazy stuff comes out. So, your goal is obviously the research side of it, but there does come a moment of commercialization where you're trying to sell this stuff, right?
Right. That's my book.
There you go. So, have you run into any issues as far as the commercialization side and reproductive ability of it? But also, have you got pushback? There's a lot of special interest groups. Talk to Christopher Dunn. I know Christopher. The big thing is, we live in a fossil fuel world for the most part, and some of these new ideas are far, far, far more beneficial as far as just the economic value and, money per kilowatt hour and all that. So there's obviously special interest groups and fossil fuels and whatnot that don't like these ideas probably.
Absolutely. And in fact, that's been the problem for years. And that's what I lived through from 1980 to 2000 was the constant conference discussion over what do we do about suppression? What do we do about the men in black? Literally, some of the greatest inventors I've known, for example, Paul Brown, was literally threatened at a Tesla conference, face to face with someone said, don't go up to the stage, don't talk about a nuclear battery. And he had already patented the thing. He had already tested it. This is a 25-year battery, which is now coming online. You can actually buy these things. And unfortunately, this was perhaps a fossil fuel company. Um, the gentleman who threatened him showed a CIA badge, which I found out later. CIA doesn't issue any badge whatsoever. So it was all fallacious stuff, and unfortunately, it's intimidation. Intimidation is the biggest word for this type of problem, which even exists today. I read about, I heard about on the latest the congressional hearing with David Grush was not only losing his retirement but the bank account. There's several people that have gone through this problem.
Have you experienced any of that yourself?
Well, as far as the suppression issue, the biggest one was back in 1999 with the Conference of Future Energy, and suffering through that through the government irrationality was a real psychologically uh, difficult period for us, and especially for myself. I felt like I'd failed. I basically didn't know what to do with myself at the first year of suffering through the trauma. And then afterwards, I realized, well, there was also a hero of mine, Dr. Um, Robert Becker. And he specifically wrote a book on The Body Electric, which was written after he got fired from Veterans Hospital for advocating electrotherapy, which is one of my favorite topics as well. So another cohort of his protege, literally, said that he would not have written that book hadn't he got fired and had the time to write it. And The Body Electric now is a bestseller. It's like the best inroad to the whole subject. Everyone seems to know that title. Yeah. So I followed the same format. I said, okay, now's my chance, because I was ABD. I'd gone through 2 different PhD preliminary exams, failed both of them. The second one on a technicality, and at the University of Buffalo. But I realized, the universe was trying to tell me something. I'm not supposed to get a conventional PhD. And so I didn't. And as a result, I finished all my credits with accredited universities, and then did a non-accredited PhD with a PhD advisor from an accredited University of Texas. So it was really the best combination. I even got praise from some of my colleagues. But overall, I did it on zero-point energy, the practical use of zero-point energy. So to me, it's still now at the forefront, 25 years later, actually 20 years later, for the subject, which is now shown possible commercialization, and it's in the prototype stage right now.
Yes. 0-point energy. A lot of people don't even really know what 0-point energy is, but you're talking about, there's ways to get energy other than, burning it and blowing it and boiling it, all these different things that we currently do with fossil fuels. And there's a lot of energy sources out there. You only have to read a little bit about Nikola Tesla to understand some of the, just it's out there. But, oh yeah.
Mention another hero of mine. Yes. There's 2 books on Nikola Tesla.
Yep. I've got a bunch of them right over here as well. But it's fascinating to me, like, that this has been around for a while. The concept has been around. I mean, obviously Nikola Tesla was, earlier in the 1900s, but
pioneer.
This has been a pioneer for sure. This has been around for a while. Is there any thoughts in your mind? Maybe I'm getting conspiratorial. I'm sorry. That this has already been developed and being used by, someone, government, military, any of that?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I expected eventually we would segue into the ufology topic, because I also have a manuscript on that topic as well. But in general, I have to say yes, based on a lot of personal interviews. Bob Lazar is one of my heroes. I met him personally. I've gone to many of his lectures. I have his book, its autobiography. And even things he's experienced back then, when he was actually at Area 51 S4, have now become verified, including the handprint gate tester for identity has now been found and verified online. So, including Google Earth. Interestingly enough, he said he worked in the desert with a series of uh, garage doors that opened, and they found it on Google Earth. So it's exciting to see Balthazar's work be verified.
Absolutely.
Some of those technologies are beyond our comprehension. John Searle was one of my projects that I followed literally since 1980 when I met him in person in Germany. And Searle's device reminds me of several other contactees who basically are channels for amazing information. Um, Searle literally, I would say, channeled 12 volumes, and they stand double-sided, about 3 feet high. I've actually seen the whole pile. John Thomas transcribed them. It was an amazing devotee of John Searle. But the Searle device, in case you don't know, is a series of magnets which are actually homopolar generators. And as they rotate, they perform some unusual effect on the quantum vacuum and start to amplify and create more voltage. And this was something I became interested in back in 1980 when I visited a group called the Sunburst Community in California, because Norman Paulson wrote a book on Sunburst: Return of the Ancients. And it was very fascinating. Half of it was on yoga, half of it was on UFOs and his experience being contacted. But the neat thing about that book was it described a rotating magnetic motor, the size of the ship. So all of these things led me to follow Searle and say, oh, Searle's like the embodiment of all these different ET magnetic motor things. Well, even to this day, and I give a lot of credit to Ivan Kruglack, who I gave information to. He had just sold his business, so he had $1 million to spend. He got a couple other investors. They spent $5 million on the Russians, who supposedly had replicated Searle, and still they couldn't get it to work. I have pictures of the assembly in Moscow. So this is my conclusion to this story of just examples of frustrated inventors is that when ETs download material to our limited brain, because we're just out of the ice age, we're just out of primitive, 10,000 years ago. I was just watching a show on NPR last night, PBS, Neanderthals. I mean, Neanderthals and Denisovans were, family people for us, pretty much. Anyways, the issue here is that we haven't been able, in many cases, civilian-wise, to replicate what the ETs already used to fly around our planet. However, the Black Project people keep shooting them down and back engineering that stuff. So that's what Bob saw in one case when all the garage doors were open. He saw about a dozen different circular craft that were all being worked on. There's the answer to your question.
We're going to dig a little bit deeper on that because you mentioned UFOs around me and my antennas come up. So
sure, yeah, mine too. Yeah.
But when we get back to the obstacle of 0 point energy is obviously the technology and the know-how and the figuring it out, but also, like I said before, the special interest groups of the fossil fuel community and all that ties in directly with climate issues, climate change and all that. That's, being blamed on fossil fuels and whatnot. So what's your current view on the climate of the climate change race and all that's going on?
My latest book, Hothouse Earth Extinction, and the subtitle is Carbon Dioxide Removal Now. This is important because you have the worst case scenario and the best solution right on the cover. I have all the charts and graphs from a dozen different journal articles that are published. Essentially, to boil it down to just a paragraph, we have a carbon dioxide level that has been up to 290 parts per million for 400,000 years. Actually, about 800,000, but we have records of the Vostok ice core, thanks to Dr. Jim Hansen, of 400,000 years. That's in the book. That's on my website. I captured it from Technology Review, MIT's magazine, back in 2006. 20 years later, we're in the same boat. We basically are ignoring history. History shows us 290 was the highest that nature ever created as the ice ages went through about a 100,000 year cycle for an ice age. 90 cold, 10,000 interglacial. We're in the interglacial. We're at the end of the interglacial. We're supposed to start getting colder now, but with all the fossil fuel burning, we've overkilled that tendency of the Earth to get cooler during another ice age that should be forthcoming. So essentially, we've now pushed that 290 up to around 420. Now, that should put shivers in everybody's spine because 290 to 420 is a huge 40-some% increase. And we're in the ozone level. I mean, we're in the twilight zone. We're in the unsurpassed area, except for 50 million years ago during the Eocene, Pliocene era, when it actually did get to higher than 400, about 800 parts per million. Well, we're headed for 800 and 1,000 parts per million by 2100. That's what all the graphs and charts show us. Carbon dioxide is a heat-trapping gas. And if you don't believe it, we have a nice video. I referenced it in the book. It's on our website. Can you give you the tiny URL for it? Essentially, it shows that if you have a tube of air and you see a candle at the far end, a light source, in other words, and you start putting carbon dioxide into that tube, eventually you won't see anything because it'll absorb all the infrared from that light source, whether it's a infrared incandescent bulb or a candle. So the absorption of carbon dioxide is so well documented scientifically. There's even a video showing little molecules of carbon dioxide and how they work and why the vibration levels are exactly the same as incoming solar energy. So we have to remove the elephant in the china shop, and that's carbon dioxide. But carbon dioxide removal is now an emerging science. And literally for a couple decades, people have been trying to do it. They're successful with thousands of parts per million. I can cite a few of them, like rock dust, basalt dust. There's a couple different spreading of thousands of square meters of rock dust on farmland, which does absorb carbon dioxide, but you only end up with 100,000, say, tons instead of 1,000,000 tons or 1,000,000,000 tons. We need billions of tons, and unfortunately, it's up to 40 gigatons that we're putting up every year of carbon dioxide. Every year, we're pumping 40 gigatons of carbon dioxide into the air. Well, the air turns out to be our atmosphere, and it's a holding station. It's literally a blanket over our living space. Right. It stays up there. One scientist said on a video I watched, the CO2 from the Model Ts, the original Model Ts, is still floating in our atmosphere. That is the scariest thing I ever heard. I thought, oh, sooner or later it'll dissipate, right? No. So that's my climate change story. And gigaton carbon dioxide removal is the only way that billionaires should be financing climate change remediation rather than, solar panels here, windmills there. Trump doesn't like windmills. Oh, we should do this. Renewables are nice. It's going to take at least 100 years to do renewables or more because nobody wants to do it. Poland's still burning coal like you wouldn't believe. Every nation is increasing their fossil fuel usage, which is, except for China. China has, we just reported on the last Future Energy News, the biggest field of solar panels enough to power Chicago. So they're really dedicated to getting finally to renewable energy quickly, but nobody else seems to be.
Wow. What's the most innovative solutions that you know about to get the CO2 out? There's a lot of different things I've read about it. Some of them are controversial. Some of them, are great ideas, but the realistic value of them isn't good. Some of them you can store it and then it seeps out anyways. So there's some really awesome and crazy ideas out there. What ones do you think are viable?
Well, I could actually Google as we're talking the different gigaton CDR solutions, and they're quite remarkable. For example, Climeworks, CLIME works. Climeworks is probably one of the most innovative, dedicated technologies with big, huge fans set up to capture carbon dioxide and reduce it to a carbonate. There's plenty of ocean assemblies that are now in the pilot stage. The first pop-up I'm getting for gigaton CDR talks about it'll be built by communities closest to the problem. In other words, having hectares of land for the spreading of rock dust, or the ocean area where you can actually do the absorption of carbon dioxide directly into the water to form a carbonic acid, it's called. And there's other gigaton industries that actually give carbon credits for their removal. And it has to be demonstrated. That's the other problem that some of them have, is proving they've actually sequestered gigatons. But even millions of tons are great. And that's really the emphasis of an expansion on this first book that I've just produced, is get into the viability of how far into the 40 gigaton level we can actually go with existing and emerging and projected carbon dioxide removal technologies.
Yeah. So this is something that I'm going to just spring on you, and sorry for that, but something very relevant now is the development of AI. These, whatever they call them, where all the computers are, number one, they generate a lot of heat. Number two, though, they take massive amounts of energy. There are people in the field who have said, I can envision one day a world that is nothing full of data centers and solar panels because of the energy required. And listen, doctor, there is no way, shape, or form that this AI arms race, so to speak, is ever going to stop, because the moment you would slow down, someone else gets ahead. Can't have that. Everyone's pushing full steam ahead, no guardrails whatsoever. So it's not going to change.
And NVIDIA are fighting to advance the technologies just by NVIDIA invested. I heard today, NVIDIA invested in OpenAI just so they could sell chips to OpenAI and make more money.
Now,
here's some money so I can make more money from you.
Yep, exactly. And it's amazing. People are starting to notice little things about like their electric bills and whatnot nationwide. This is a real thing, man. And energy costs money. And a lot of it is going to data centers and AI. So this is a massively important thing down the road. I mean, like now and down the road. So that's why this 0 point energy thing is so important, right?
Right. So can we share screen and I can at least point to one of the hopeful signs?
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is an example of one of the several articles that Dr. Garrett Modell from the University of Colorado has produced. And I see the green line around it, so I think you're actually able to read this.
Yep.
Open energy capturing effervescence. It's one of his more recent ones. He has very, I would say, impressive articles in peer-reviewed journals as well. This particular one is a Journal of Scientific Exploration, which is fine and very detailed, and that's all that really matters for our purposes. But as we cruise down it, let me point out that it's combining quantum vacuum and nanoelectronics. And this is drawing energy from the quantum vacuum. This is something 20 years ago wasn't even imagined to be possible. And when I did my PhD and also my book, 0 Point Energy Fuel of the Future, very few people believed I was really talking about practicality. Yeah. So I have another book on the practical use of 0 Point Energy. But predicting the future 20 years in advance is my business. So look at this. Power density of 20 watts, 70 watts per square meter. And how does he do it? Okay, for those scientific people of curiosity, let me point out that during a certain level of current and voltage, current is at a vertical level, voltage is on the horizontal, we actually produce power. But specifically, he's using a Casimir cavity. And the Casimir cavity specifically is this colorful model that's seen in this paper. And specifically, it's two parallel plates. The different rainbow colors on the outside show all the optical modes, all the frequencies of the quantum vacuum virtual particles. You have to understand that the quantum vacuum is not empty. It's producing constant virtual particles that come out of the vacuum momentarily and then go back in the vacuum. It's energy and mass combined, E equals mc squared in motion. But between the two, which are nanometers apart of the two parallel plates, you get very limited resonant modes of electromagnetic energy. In other words, virtual particles that could make it into that vacuum. Well, keep in mind, this is what we're talking about to limit the virtual particle exchange from the vacuum. Well, what do we do with that kind of concept? Almost no one has ever thought of what to do with it. However, good old Garrett came up with the idea that he could actually optimize an MIM diode. It's a metal insulator metal diode. And I should be able to find the diagram of that, which is actually in this article, and for some reason I'm sliding right past it. But he basically puts the Casimir cavity right above the metal insulator metal upper electrode. So this is a diagram showing that what normally would be an exchange of electrons. However, with the Casimir cavity of the two parallel plates that I just showed you, this is now limiting how many virtual particles can come down in from the top, and yet all the different frequencies can come in from the bottom. Well, this asymmetry literally forms an electron flow. And that's the exciting part, that we literally have an electron flow that then can be used to produce electricity for a useful output of 70 watts per square meter. And that's what these other diagrams are showing as well. So this is just one example of, there's the diagram I was looking for, where the Casimir cavity is on top, optical cavity is called, and then the MIM diode is below. So this is the first time this has been done. He has essentially patented this. He's got grad students working on it. I have high hopes that we're going to see the release of this product very soon. And this would be a great impetus for the data sharing, data centers. Nuclear fusion breakthrough would also be even more substantial because the energy output from this particular Garrett Model invention is small. But either way, we're talking about perpetual motion here. Yeah. It was always prohibited, and now we're seeing it manifest in various things, including, let me give a little plug for the University of Arkansas, Dr. Thibodeau. It's spelled Thibodeau, Thibado, but Thibodeau is the pronunciation. But Phil Thibodeau has actually found that a single atom layer of graphene will oscillate indefinitely from thermal energy. And it took him 10 years to produce a circuit that would produce electricity from that oscillation. So once again, there's another example of perpetual motion. So the two of them are in communication and maybe in competition to see who gets to the market first.
Right. Whenever you get into this stuff, perpetual motion and laws of conservation of energy and all that, and you're getting something out of nothing seemingly, right. Does that indicate that perhaps we need to revisit our physics?
Well, that's what I addressed in my PhD thesis, and also the practical conversion of energy, which is the other book that I can flash in front of people. You got books every year over there. I've got dozens of books. I've been at it for a long time, 45 years. So essentially, it's exciting to see the best journal articles, Nature, Physical Review, all have addressed the same problem. And Puthoff and Radin, Haish, have also produced amazing articles on how inertia is a zero-point energy phenomenon, and also gravity is a zero-point energy phenomenon. And they published both of those titles in Physical Review. But they couldn't have published it without explaining what you just said, is that we're getting something out of nothing. How can you explain it? Well, they're using what's called stochastic electrodynamics. It's different than quantum electrodynamics, but it assumes that there's some random fluctuations of space happening and doesn't give an attribution to where it's coming from. So that's a cop-out in many ways, of course, but it also allows them to explain something that through quantum mechanics would be a little more difficult physically to prove. But overall, it really is something that the physical vacuum, Scientific American had a great article called The Physical Vacuum. And that's where I first studied back in the 1980s. Literally, that article appeared showing that if you have a high enough voltage, you can get electron-positron pairs happening spontaneously. So the breakdown of the physical vacuum is possible with no special technology. That's how close we are to energy equals mc squared all the time. I even know a physicist that explained that our bodies are doing it. So I got interested in food-free energy, food-free living. Breatharianism, Pranic Living Festival is one of the annual things in Italy that have people that don't eat, for example. And the only way to explain that, including a scientist who wrote a book on living on light, that's the title of the book, Living on Light. He was a biologist and he couldn't understand how his body was able to do it, but he went through the 2-week training course with as Musin. It's an unusual lady who's been teaching everyone how to become breatharian. And certainly he still filled out the book of all of his experiences and then still was in a quandary as far as how does the body do this conversion to all the nutrients and the proteins and everything we're used to doing orally.
Yeah. Dude, the human body is, it's remarkable. It's amazing. You talked about, you talked about some other things kind of associated with this in terms of propulsion. The Miller Quantum Vacuum Propulsion Project, and there's a couple UAP warp drive research things going on. How does that all connect?
Well, there's a website for those who are interested in how the quantum vacuum is really producing some exciting things, and it's called altpropulsion.com, and APEC for short, because it's a conference that Tim Ventura puts on about once a month. And altpropulsion.com is an exciting one to join because you'll get emails whenever he has these events. And so recently, Doug Miller was one example. I don't know if I grabbed his book. Yeah, it's on my desk in the other office. But essentially, he was excited about the propulsion concepts using SED. And it was, once again, an interesting theory that certainly there are some arrangements, you would say, that the quantum vacuum might be able to have an asymmetry enough to produce a force. So that's where Miller's work comes in. And it is fairly convincing. He spends most of the lecture explaining what quantum vacuum reversible particles are. But the other one I really am excited about is Chad Wanless, Wanless. Chad Wanless wrote a book called Hidden in Plain Sight. And he did it with a professor from the university who I've talked to, or did a joint phone conversation with three of us. And what he found, and is on this amazing video at altpropulsion.com, showing that the UAP and UFO videos and photos show optical anomalies. For example, the top of a saucer that usually sometimes has a cone or whatever you want to call it, the top protrusion, and it was off-center. So he basically analyzes this in terms of gravitational lensing. And you're forced by all the evidence he shows, including some of the videos, which have these blurriness, ahead of the craft, very strange things people have ignored up to the point where he finally, explained it in this wonderful lecture. I think he's ahead of all the physicists in the world in this specialization of using general relativity to analyze UFO and UAP photos and videos. So this is exciting to know that you don't need a massive star to create gravitational lensing. There are electromagnetic means, apparently, that these ETs craft are able to perform and utilize to really achieve a gravitational nullification and also a propulsive effect.
Allegedly, there's a stable isotope of element 115 out there that does it too.
That's what Balazar says. We're still hoping the white isotope will be found. I was hoping we'd have a breakthrough when 115 was isolated, but it was a long isotope.
Yeah. Well, who knows, man? I mean, that story of Bob is so amazing because it just, every couple of years there's another drip of, oh, that was true,
Yeah.
Yeah. Something amazing, man. You talked about the body, which, like I said, the human body is fascinating. You start getting into that. I was a biology nut back in school, and just learning about not just biology, but the systems of the earth, the Krebs cycle and all these different things. But you're into it, man, as far as healing and whatnot. The Institute's come up with some really cool things. Tell us about it.
Sure. Thanks. Let me go ahead and share screen again if I can.
Sure.
That particular endeavor, first of all, has been a love of mine for years. And really, I started with the essential interest in bioelectromagnetics. This is the latest cover of my book, Bioelectromagnetic Healing. And it's a very popular book, by the way. It's on Amazon. And it has all the explanations for why the body not only can counter inflammation by using electrons, either from pulsed magnetics or from high voltage devices, both of which we sell, to essentially achieve what I call electrons are antioxidants, the equivalency of electrons and antioxidants. When you think of taking a pill, vitamin C, vitamin A, vitamin D, all these antioxidants donate electrons to free radicals. And free radicals are tissue damaging. You can see it in people's faces. If you have facial wrinkling, that means all your organs are wrinkling and losing tenacity, elastin, and so forth. So if you are infusing electrons, easiest way, for example, is walk barefoot outdoors. The earth is an electron donor. So if your feet in contact with the grass, with any surface like that, will absorb electrons into your body, rejuvenate the body, and stop free radicals, which replicate about 10,000 times, producing about 10,000 free radicals from one unpaired electron molecule. For example, if you take a shower without a shower filter, many people do, thinking that chlorine is no problem. Well, chlorine actually disassociates. Chlorine molecule is Cl2. It disassociates at body temperature. So the warmth of a hot shower on your body literally gets absorbed into your skin and produces lots of free radical reactions. I learned that originally from a water filter salesman. He essentially took some tap water, put a few drops of his special liquid in it. It turned yellow. He says, "There's a chlorine. Okay, now let's try this again and put your finger in the water glass." And I did for about 10 seconds. And then he put his little dropper into it, and it was no yellow anymore. My finger had absorbed all the chlorine. Wow. I said, "Oops." Yeah. I wanted shower filter in the water filter. Yeah. So, okay. So anyways, let me share a screen to the article that I published, and it's in tiny print, so I have to guess it. There it is. I think that's it. Yep. Okay. This is my latest article. I have literally about a dozen articles on various topics like this. But this particular one, I wanted to put all the best benefits in the title. So the pulsed EMF product, which you see at the bottom, we sold over 1,000 of these, follows the work of Dr. Glenn Gordon. Dr. Glenn Gordon was a special doctor. He was a medical doctor who literally followed a career of family doctor, helping people, very compassionate doctor. He even produced a couple of video lectures, which we have. Came to our conference of future energy, gave a wonderful theoretical talk there as well. But I forced him to tell his personal story, which is he unfortunately suffered from cardiac disease, and he was scheduled for a heart transplant. This is a medical doctor who was going to go under the knife with another doctor to basically remove his heart. So he didn't want to do that, of course. So instead, he studied what NASA had done to counter inflammation and activate what's called heat shock protein. And the heat shock protein essentially activates the tissue repair. And that's what the latest NASA article and patent is all about. They found and proved that their device that matches our device, which we produced way before they did, actually does clinically proven tissue repair in a number of different areas. So if you have injuries, traumatic injuries, it's amazing how you can counter the inflammatory response. But NASA also helped us in regards to cartilage loss. So, and the cardio protection under stress is what the full title is. That was in Nature magazine. So essentially, that's the summary of what our institute does and gives you an idea of how it is beneficial.
A device like that, I mean, come on, doctor, that's okay. As someone who, I'm 52 years old. When I was younger, man, I loved to run. I loved it. And I'm also an entertainer, so I've got a lot of miles on the chassis, so to speak, as far as that goes. But I suffer from, arthritis to a degree, and it certainly has limited what I could do. Man, hearing that there's a device like that, that's got to, not only just for, somebody like me, but I'm thinking NFL or professional sports. If NASA's doing this, there's a reason why. And obviously living in space causes all kinds of problems.
Yeah, it's for the astronauts, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, I would think that this is the kind of product that really people would be interested in.
And they are. Every time I do coast to coast, for example, we're busy for about 4 months with orders. The product sells itself. In fact, we just got a testimonial from a wonderful dentist out in the West Coast. And if I can read just a portion of her letter, I think I printed it out. She essentially states the benefit that she's received from the use of what we call the osteopad. And I thought I have the article written. Anyways, it just received last night, literally. So I thought, this is a synchronicity. And basically, she's found that her bone density has increased for the DEXA scan, medical scan you get at the doctor's office, 2 years in a row using the osteopad, which is at osteopad.org, OSTEOPAD, osteopad.org. And this follows what Dr. Glenn Gordon hoped to produce, which we finally did after his passing, a couple of pancake coils that produce a toroidal magnetic field that penetrates the body really well. And if you get a longer one, you get a couple toroids in the assembly. They come in 3 different sizes. 14 by 20 inches, most popular, which is the original osteopad. And that's all Dr. Gregg is using. And she was so excited. She was thanking us for such a great invention. But it's nice to know that there are books written on pulsed EMF. And it's surprising that medical doctors are coming to us to purchase these things, including dentists and chiropractors and other clinicians, when medical schools should be teaching it. But in my book, Bioelectromagnetic Healing, we find that the Flexner Report around 1920, which Dr. Gordon lived through, he told us his personal experience of, it banned electrotherapy from hospitals and from funding, and essentially stopped the medical schools from teaching it. So afterwards, only pharmaceutical companies were able to remedy things with their drugs with lots of side effects.
Yeah. Isn't it crazy, man?
That's what we're living with now. Yeah.
Yep. Oh gosh, you can get into so much of the stuff that happened early on like that, and just the reasons behind it, just like the diet, saturated fats versus sugars, and there's so many things, man. It's just what are we doing? And I mean, Eastern medicine is a real thing. There's no doubt about that. No doubt about it. What about red light? That's a thing right now. Everybody's like, hey, red light therapy.
Yes.
What can you tell me about that?
It actually does help produce brown fat. It does a number of anti-inflammatory benefits. But the interesting thing, 870 nanometers, if you write down 870 nm, that's the abbreviation for 870 nanometers. That turns out to be the frequency or the wavelength of the red light study that was done on improving vision in older people. So you only need 3 minutes a day. We actually purchased a new red light, which is actually probably one of the better ones, but they're cheap, $20 maybe for a light bulb. And we put ours on top of the fireplace. So when you get up in the morning, which is apparently the best time to do this, stand in front of the red light bulb for about 3 minutes. Only once a week is really needed, and it has a long-lasting effect on improving your vision. Apparently, because maybe we don't get very much red light. We get a lot of blue light from our monitors, from the sky. The ultraviolet really turns into, high spectrum light, but the reddish color, especially around 870, is a deficiency that this red light therapy is supplied. Also, I might as well mention, there's whole face masks that are available for it, and you probably know about that. Jesse Michaels, who's famous for his podcast, just was sponsored by one of those red light face masks that removes wrinkles, supposedly.
I probably shouldn't say this. I bought my wife one of those for Christmas last year. She put it on, and I was like, oh my gosh, I think it's Friday the 13th walking around. So that's awesome, man. You don't have any hobbies apparently.
Yeah, I meditate, I practice yoga, and we go on walks, nature walks once in a while. And I try to do racquetball. I played racquetball for a short while with my wife last weekend. But yeah, you have hobbies as long as they don't take too much time. And we go to Florida. We have a condo in Florida in Titusville. So that's our escape.
All right. So beyond propulsion and healing, you've also, because you have so much, you're not busy enough. You've gotten into vertical farming and magma-based power. I mean, how close are we to tapping into those?
Well, they're two diverse things. I unfortunately put them in the same sentence, but vertical farming, I feel, is literally the future of farming. And we invested money, about $1,000, into vertical farming, which has now been bought by another company, and the stock has actually increased in value. So vertical farming is worth investigating for anyone that has some liquid funds to play with. But the interesting advantage, which we've done future energy stories on, and you can see them archived on our website, integrityresearchinstitute.org, and also the other one I mentioned previously. Vertical farming literally is in a warehouse, which has layers of soil-less growing media that plants love, no bugs, no insecticides needed, and 90% less water. Right now, they're commercially available products, mostly salads and so forth, at Whole Foods stores. But a lot of different crops are now being, I would say, upscaled to more substantial food items. But the interesting thing is it's very reliable and very predictable, and it's not dependent on the seasons or the weather. So overall, the advantages are tremendously more profound than if you try to optimize a plot of farmland. So in a way, I feel that even with the soybean crisis right now, that if farmers were investing much less in growing soybeans, perhaps they could weather the storm of these tariffs that limit where they can sell and how much they can sell their products for. Geothermal energy is plentiful in the United States. We literally just had another future energy story on that as well. Geothermal is a friend of mine has under his house. Before he built his house, he had it drilled all the way down to a nice hot area, and essentially has heat 24 hours, 360 days a year. But the more advantageous use of geothermal is when you drill into magma, because it's like space solar power. You get at least 10 times more bang for your buck sending a liquid down there and bringing it back up than you do just with normal geothermal. Magma is a lot hotter, obviously. And what I feel is really a problem that we in the United States have, which very few people talk about, is the Yellowstone caldera.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody used to tell it on your show, but they should tell a whole story, which I've seen a 1-hour video about on educational TV. The caldera is literally the size of the lake in Yellowstone. And the reporter that was on the video was saying, well, where is this caldera? He said, you're looking at it, and you could see water for as far as you could see, and tiny little shoreline at the far end of the lake. This thing is the biggest caldera in the world. I have a diagram showing comparisons to Mount St. Helens and the predicted explosion when this caldera goes off. This is monstrously bigger than even some of the others that we've already experienced in the past few thousand years. Yeah. So, and we're doing nothing about it. But if we actually got busy and started calculating how much heat do we have to remove from the magma, not only to power our country, but also to reduce the heat in this magma plume that's right underneath Yellowstone, pushing its way upwards into geysers and stuff, we might be able to delay the explosion to much later.
Yeah, and that plume is, I mean, the ground is literally swelling. They see it rising. Not millimeters, but inches. Decent amount per year. So there's definitely, that's a wild ride right there. And you're right. I need to have someone on about that.
And I should mention also, if you don't mind me interrupting, is that Iceland has already done it.
Yeah.
This isn't a theoretical, what if. Iceland's already drilled into magma and they're producing electricity. It's a small prototype power plant, but the fact that they did it and the metal drill survived the drilling into magma, proves that, hey, this technology is doable in the United States too.
Yep, for sure, man. It's so interesting. This stuff is all just right there for the taking, and why it hasn't been taken. That's kind of the question that gets really interesting. So, you got some other stuff, man. You talked about it briefly early on, and I'm excited to hear about this. You got any updates on your planned ufology textbook and why academics need it?
Well, yes. As we see from even some of the latest videos, which I was actually hoping to grab and then replay for you, but you've probably seen it already. The last congressional hearing, which had David Grush and a few others, including the video, I'm missing his name, TV interviewer of Balbazar. Essentially, they also showed a newly released Air Force video of a Hellfire missile fired at a round white globe traveling through the air, hitting it, knocking it off course, and then it continues on. The missile gets destroyed. The UFO is not hardly touched at all. But for me, it was super exciting because, hey, as a physicist, I could sit down and probably calculate what's the mass of the UFO, because the angle, the speed, the impact of object, Hellfire missile, how much does it weigh? And so you can do a impact momentum transfer, impulse momentum, it's called in physics labs, to actually get some more information about that UAP. So essentially, we're seeing more and more videos proving that they're real. And I have a problem in a way. I've already devoted 13 chapters. Very exciting. It's on a video you can watch. on our website. It's specifically on the integrityresearchinstitute.org website. And just look for the videos, watch our videos icon. And what is interesting about that slideshow that I did at a UFO Congress, it was called the Mega Conference back in a few years ago in Nevada, is that as you go through the different slideshow chapters that I did, they're constantly emerging and changing. So we have more revelations every day, and I'm hesitant to put in contactee information. I've dealt with Britt Elders, for example. You can see an interview I did of her. If you don't know who Britt Elders is, she's the only surviving author of the Pleiades UFO contact from the Pleiades. UFO contact from the Pleiades. It was released 45 years ago. I told her she should have made it the 50-year anniversary because she just released a new book combining the two books together.
Right.
But essentially, that's the longest lasting contactee with Billy Myers that's ever existed on Earth. And even Ancient Aliens doesn't want to reveal that story, perhaps because the UFO pictures are too high resolution. Wow. And they're fake. Just because they're high res, they must be fake. That's the instant conclusion most people seem to have. Even though the original pictures were sold on Sotheby's for quite a few bucks. But Billy Myers is still alive today, and I was so pleased to interview her because I didn't mention is that the contactee, Samyasi, is the best pronunciation I can give for the name of the ET female. That is very humanoid, very real looking human. She's constantly come back to visit Billy, and Britt Elders was fortunate to interview Billy many times over the past 45 years and is convinced this contact was real and that the photographs are actually verified as well. So it brings me down to the astrosociology concept of the book. You know, we can have more and more hardware all we want, and that's what the ufology textbook is about. Here's some hardware, here's wonderful photographs. Here's events, Rendlesham Forest, for example, where information was conveyed. We even have Chilbolton, which to me is the most exciting exchange with an old Carl Sagan diagram of our Earth and various informative details. And then the supposedly, it's a crop circle, shows what apparently is an alien version of what their planet has. Anyway, so the sociological concept, to me, is the most basic problem we have right today. You know, why did the 1952 flyby of the Washington, D.C. area fail in very, very many ways, causing the Air Force to just try to shoot them down, when in reality, George Van Tassel, 6 months earlier, conveyed to the U.S. Air Force office in D.C. with a return request receipt proving they received the letter that they were going to do a flyby in July. And this is insane. You know, it was predicted. The ET said, we're coming. We hope you don't get, attacked from the front or whatever. The email was the conveyance, the channeling was so specific that no one could deny that this was already anticipated. But of course, when it happened, all of that was forgotten or ignored, or maybe was never conveyed to the management and the Air Force. And so the whole contact that was supposedly, encouraged maybe by flying by, was lost. And that's what the ETs, unfortunately, have been doing a lot of, is showing off their hardware and not conveying the emotional and intellectual communication we really need.
Yeah. No, don't get me started. Don't get me started. Is it fair to say, I don't want to put you on the spot here, but is it fair to say, Dr. Valone, that you believe whatever they are, aliens are real and these craft are real and they're higher technology?
Absolutely. In all three areas of commentary you just mentioned. And it's funny to start with something that is anomalous. You don't know where it comes from. That's what you see in the congressional hearings over and over again. Well, it's unidentified aerial phenomena, which is the new phrase for, removing it from even a AT type of designation. But overall, eventually you get to, as the Ancient Aliens show is doing more and more of, well, we can't explain it. It's doing right angle turns that nobody else can do. It has incredible acceleration, which we can't do on this Earth. It also goes in the ocean and comes out. These craft tend to exceed all of our capabilities. Eventually, you have to admit. Oh, by the way, I don't know if you saw Jesse Michaels' video.
No.
Jesse Michaels, American Alchemy is his phraseology for his website, American Alchemy. Highly recommend it. The latest one was an interview of Swedish, I'm maybe guessing wrong, astronomer who literally went back to before we even had satellites, before 1950, proving that transients were shown in photographs of the atmosphere, of the nighttime star collection. In other words, transients are either short appearances of a light or a streak of light, both of which usually mean there's a real object there. Well, she tracked them all through the different decades in various recordings that she had access to. She wants to do a lot more. She's releasing Nature Scientific Reports article, which now is under review. And she did this interview slightly before it was published. But the fascinating thing is she's up to maybe 10,000, 100,000 sightings. She says, we're being visited all the time because I have the proof in all these photographs, in all these videos. She has videos too of these craft. You lived it. Yeah, telescopes have been telling us this story for decades.
Right. And you lived it, man. I mean, in just the 0 point energy stuff and whatnot. And then also all of this, you lived through that time of massive suppression. I mean, think about back at 2000 even, or even go into the 90s or 80s. I mean, it's just like you talk about any of this stuff as reality and you're a nut job, and it's amazing. I think it's really, I think there is active suppression still. And I think it's oftentimes about technology and power and money and everything else. But I also think that there's too much now to continue the same charade of no, it's not real. I think there's just too much out there.
Yeah. I mean, I can tell you more suppression stories if your channel is into it. So number one is I was supposed to be on a UFO program at least a decade ago, a little more than a decade ago, with Dan Aykroyd. And I was looking forward to it. It was kind of a novel idea that UFOs would actually be discussed in an era where even Ancient Aliens was not even on the air. So I'm guessing 2 decades ago. Well, it was canceled all of a sudden. Literally, when I had the plane ticket to fly to New York City for the interview, no explanation, program canceled. So it was years later when Dan Aykroyd's interviewed of what happened that day, or there was a particular day, in other words, when something happened. Okay, the story he told is a car pulled up, he's outside having a smoke, he sees these 2 gentlemen walk in that have hats on, men in black, I guess. I forgot the color of their suits, but they looked similar to each other. They went to the producer's office. He doesn't know what was quite exchanged between them and the producer. But then when he walked out, he said, this is a one-way street. I should have seen the car continue. But when I looked back, the car had disappeared. And that's exactly when I received the notification that the program was canceled. So that's what was happening back then. And literally, there's another story, which I need to remember the gentleman's name. He was the director of the Air Force Research Lab. I tell that story many different places in my books and also on video. But what happened with him was he basically was in charge of research for the Air Force, or so we thought. So every so often he would come across new propulsion ideas. He even contributed to a book, which I don't have in front of me to flash them. It's Faster Than Light. That's the name of the book. In fact, I have the cover on the wall in front of me. I contributed to David Froning's recording of his whole life's work on producing a faster than light experiment that would really work. And it dealt with toroids. He was inspired by the Palladian Billy Meyer thing. Anyways, back to the story at hand. Well, the research, Air Force Research Lab director, I finally met in Kansas City. It's Kansas City Joint Propulsion Conference. Finally shook hands with him. And immediately he started dumping emotionally on me about his experience he was about to retire, I guess, too. And so he said, I'm in a research lab, but I'm not supposed to do any research. He said, I've done this a couple times, rolled up something to show the bosses, and I got a cut in pay. He said, I was even given a trip to the Pentagon where I was warned that I could be court-martialed if I continued to do this type of work. And he said, I knew I can't be court-martialed because I'm a civilian PhD, but I understand I shouldn't accept the $10 million from a congressman that he was being offered. So he said, in conclusion, he said, I'm a research lab, but really I'm a storefront. And that's about it. So this is very convincing that the entire military has these two compartments, the white area and the black area. The black budget is fairly big, billions and billions of dollars we've been funding for 50 years.
Yeah.
Or more. And all of that's going to Area 51 and so forth.
For sure.
And of course, he wasn't supposed to know about that. But when he started to get too close to it, that's when he got the pushback.
Right. Yep. It's amazing. It's always the same story. It's speckled with the same dust, but it's too much. It's just too much to deny anymore. There's no doubt about it. After all the decades of work, man, that you've done, what do you have the most hope in right now?
Oh, the most hope, I would say, not only for myself and meditating and getting a spiritual breakthrough, but for the public at hand, I would say really climate change and the carbon dioxide gigaton removal is probably at the forefront to save humanity from intolerable heat that we're going to experience just in a few decades. I mean, we're going up about 1 degree per decade, maybe 20 years at the most, and it's accelerating. The graph is actually curved upwards, whichever way I go with my hand to show it's an exponential increase in temperature. We don't want to live through this mass extinction. That's why I'm the first one to use the word extinction in my title, because when you get up to 6 degrees, we're at barely +2 right now, which was already predicted by the work of Jim Hansen in the 1980s. His computer graphs are still right on target. He's at the 1.5 for the 2025 area. That's exactly what most experts agree, that throughout the country area, throughout the world, we're at 1.5 degrees higher than we should be. But it's 2 degrees or higher in cities. But when you get to 3 degrees, 4 degrees, I should mention for people who are really concerned about the details, Nat Geo, National Geographic, did a video which is online for free now. 6 degrees could change the world. And if you look at that video, I could only survive 3 or 4 degrees because it gets more and more dismal as you get to 5 and 6. We're headed for a desert in western United States. The Sahara Desert is expanding. The Brazilian rainforest is going to be gone. Not only the Arctic, which will be ice-free in another decade or two, but Antarctic is losing what they call a doomsday glacier. I just saw a whole article in Scientific American about it, and then I researched all the other articles they had already published. It's called the Thwaites Glacier, but they call it Doomsday Glacier in quotes, because it's the fastest moving glacier in Antarctica, and it's land-based. So when it flies into the ocean, which is doing now at record rate, billions of tons every hour, every year. The issue here is we're scheduled for 2 to 3 feet of sea level rise just in the next couple decades. That's just when the initial part of that glacier will become waterbound. And as soon as that ice gets into the water and falls into the water, instead of being a shelf, which it is now, we're going to have this amazing quick increase in sea level, which 2 to 3 feet is going to, I mean, you should see all the hotels that are on the beach throughout the world. It's insane. I don't know why these millionaires or billionaires built hotels right next to sea level as if it's never going to change, Anyway, I could go on and on forever with what I'm most optimistic about is not only the humans as we receive more and more pain. Tony Robbins says we do more to avoid pain than we do for pleasure. So it's got to be a little bit painful before we actually do something drastic. And that is throw billions of dollars at something that requires billions of tons of removal. And when we get to $1 a ton, hey, that's going to be really easy. We're at about $100 a ton right now. But I believe it's solar powered, renewable energy could do this with a one-time investment. And then you're constantly removing the carbon dioxide with virtually no cost because the energy comes from, renewables. So that's the other most exciting. And then I feel Garrett Modell's zero point energy invention and also nuclear fusion, which is being reported every week as being closer and closer to break even, will be really our saving grace as far as getting away from fossil fuels quickly.
Yeah. It's an interesting paradox that we are in right now. I mean, I just read Bill Gates, who obviously massive in the climate change realm, is slowly kind of almost feels like changing his tune because he realizes how much power they're going to need for data centers. I mean, I really believe the AI and the data centers is going to be instrumental in which way we zig or zag on this, because I do think it's a problem. And I think it's a problem that unfortunately gets blown out of proportion in ways that it doesn't need to sometimes to make it real. It is a real problem. But there's extremists that, will doomsday it whenever, listen, we don't doomsday it. We fix it, and we can, you know what I mean? And I there's just a lot of fear that goes into it. And I believe that there's realities behind it, but I just believe that, man, let's roll up our sleeves and fix it. And I think it's encouraging to hear someone like you, Dr. Valone, who's, in it to win it.
Yes, right. Yeah, absolutely. I'm very optimistic all the time. So when people are very negative and pessimistic, I jump to the opposite side and say, well, what could we do? Because I'm in that with heart. Engineering physics has been my constant exchange through grad school. I did electroengineering for a while, then I did physics for a while, and back and forth. So I feel the engineering physics marriage is perhaps the easiest way we can attack almost any issue that seems like unsolvable for the public. But when you get to the science of it, it's not as complicated as it seems.
That's awesome, man. Only someone like you would say that. I love it. All right.
Absolutely.
Tell my audience here how they can learn all about you, all of your stuff, get your products, all of that.
Well, the product that we're most supporting is the bioenergydevice.org. Bioenergy device is all one word. Bioenergydevice.org is the website where you can see all the high voltage Premier Juniors. We have a chair, a Tesla chair, where you can sit in it, turn on the switch, and light a light bulb in your hand, just like Tesla did. So it infuses the whole body with high voltage electrons. We also have a Lukovsky multi-wave antenna, a bunch of circles of high voltage display, and actually I heard the Boston Museum bragging about a demonstration of a lightning storm indoors. Well, I said, well, that's our Lukovsky multi-wave oscillator, 250,000 volts. That's a lightning storm for you. So, but also the Premier Junior is a handheld device. I didn't show a picture of it, but that's a very popular one too. And you can put it on your body, literally, to infuse electrons into an area that's painful. Because pain usually comes with an association of free radicals. So if you put the infusion of electrons right into that spot, oftentimes people will report a pain relief very quickly. And I find, for example, well, we had one story I can tell, and that is a fellow came into our office in a wheelchair, and he had knee problems that doctors couldn't fix. Well, we sold him a Premier Junior, used it on his knees for a couple months, came back in crutches. And then the last time he came back, I think he only had a cane. So he was very happy to return each time and show us the benefit, the visible results of his use of the devices.
Yeah, that'd make a massive change in your life too, being wheeled around in a wheelchair versus being able to do it yourself, walk with a cane even. Just the stagnant, lifestyle of living in a wheelchair obviously causes issues itself. So that's amazing. That's awesome, man.
And it really, that's to the point of which I should mention for people who aren't at that stage yet. And I've seen colleagues of mine, Elizabeth Rauscher was one of my best friends. She went downhill into, trying to get a joint replacement surgery and then finally passed away. Last stage I saw her was in a wheelchair. And unfortunately, it was knee problems. So if anyone has knee pain, which is very common for older people, all you need to do, this is so simple of a solution. I lived through it because I was, in my 40s, taking advantage of a house for free rent, but it had no heat. So I went through the winter with no heat. And of course, I didn't think of wearing long johns. I was a kid. I was thinking in my 40s. And of course, I started getting arthritic knees, which were so painful I could hardly get out of the car. And then I started to wonder, well, what can you do so it doesn't get worse? Because most people will start complaining and then, baby it, sit sedentary more often, it only gets worse. Well, as you study joints and joint phenomenon in the biological human body, first thing you learn, and I learned, is that joints have no blood circulation whatsoever. And I pause for impact, because when you realize there's no blood delivery of nutrients there, what else can you do? Turns out stress is the only thing that joints like to get infused chondroitin, glucosamine, and MSM. Those are the 3 oral things you can start taking immediately. There's MSM cream that I use every so often. When I feel a little twinge, the joint's talking to me. MSM cream works really well because it absorbs through the skin. However, doing at least 10 to 15 squats, I do it with 20-pound weights in my hands, but I started with no weights because the joints have to be stressed in order to open up calcium transport and to get the other nutrients in there too, to rebuild cartilage. Well, our device, osteopad.org, and even our EF Pulsar contributes to cartilage regeneration as well. So you can do both and get multiple benefits more quickly. But the squats, knee bend squats, just vertically squatting as low as you can tolerate, is a wonderful thing to do twice a week. So remediational that I have a guy in his 80s who came back to thank me for recommending that. He said, my doctor told me to do it, but I didn't believe it. But then when you told me, he actually did start, and then now his knees are all better. And he gets a bicycle again.
That's what they say. Motion is lotion. That's what they say. And it's the truth, man. I can verify that. Hey, this has been a fascinating conversation. I really appreciate you coming on. And just, I would, if I could give you any advice, I'd say, just don't be bored. You sound like you don't have much going on.
I have lots of challenges, but it is an isolated atmosphere that I live through.
Oh, I think it's awesome, man. I appreciate you so much. Folks, go check them out online. I'm going to check out some of your products too. I'm very interested in it. So I appreciate you. If you ever have anything you want to come on back and talk about, please get in touch with me, and I appreciate you.
You're welcome. Happy to do that.
Awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Dr. Tom Valone. Thank you, sir.
Sure. Thanks a lot for having me.
What an incredible ride through the edges of science and suppression. A huge thank you to Dr. Tom Valone for joining us and for the lifetime of work he's poured into understanding the unseen forces that power both the universe and us. If you'd like to support his mission, visit integrityresearch.org. And while you're there, check out his groundbreaking books and PEMF healing devices that make amazing Christmas gifts for anyone who believes in both faith and physics. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure you subscribe, like, and share this episode. And don't forget, you can listen on the go on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And as we head into the Christmas week, I'll be sitting down with Dr. Jim Rankin next week for a powerful, faith-filled conversation you won't want to miss. You folks are awesome. Truly the greatest gift all year long. Thank you. Be amazing, be positive, and stay curious out there, my friends. And I will see you right here next time on The Ryan Files.
Are you not curious?
Preparing to transfer the Ryan files. Now.
I present to you, with great intrigue and wonder, the Ryan Files.